Did you know that some of the biggest boxing legends look almost unrecognizable today? From Vitali Klitschko trading his boxing gloves for a politician's suit to Roy Jones Jr., who no longer has the lightning speed that made him famous, here are 20 boxing legends you'd never recognize today. 1. Evander Holyfield. Evander Holyfield was previously referred to as the real deal, simply because he was among the most resilient and talented boxers to ever set foot in the ring. He was a 4-time heavyweight champion, a feat unheard of in boxing history. Holyfield went toe-to-toe with legends such as Mike Tyson, Lennox Lewis, and Riddick Bowe, and every bout of his was always electrifying. One of his greatest moments was the notorious bite fight with Mike Tyson in 1997 when Tyson astonishingly bit off part of Holyfield's ear. That episode is still being discussed today as one of boxing's wildest moments. In his day, Holyfield was recognizable by his muscular build, shaved head, and piercing gaze. However, if you catch him today, you might just do a double take. Gone is the intimidating, chiseled figure with a full head of hair. Today, he has a completely shaved head and a much more subdued, milder presence. Although he remains in great physical condition, his look has changed dramatically, making him one of the boxing legends you'd hardly recognize today. Despite his more subdued appearance, Holyfield is still active in boxing. He makes the occasional public appearance and gives advice to up-and-coming boxers. 2. George Foreman. If you recall George Foreman from his early days, then you likely envision a giant, menacing fighter with a tough scowl and a devastating knockout punch that would send foes flying across the ring. Foreman was a 2-time heavyweight world champion and an Olympic gold medalist. His most noted bout was against Muhammad Ali in the 1974 Rumble in the Jungle, where Ali employed his now famous rope-a-dope tactic to exhaust Foreman before knocking him out. At that point, Foreman was a daunting figure, broad, solemn, and near unbeatable. Yet his change in the intervening years is truly astounding. After retiring twice, Foreman reinvented himself in a manner no one could have anticipated. He became a grill salesman, preacher, and television personality, famous for his warm smile and friendly demeanor. The once intimidating fighter is now most famous for the George Foreman Grill, which was a huge success, selling millions of units globally. Rather than knocking individuals out, Foreman inspires individuals with his words and business acumen. He frequently shows up in interviews, sharing tales of his days as a boxer and how he reformed his life. If you look at old photographs of him from the 1970s compared to today, you can see a drastic change from a fierce fighter to a grandfatherly figure. 3. Mike Tyson. If you were a boxing aficionado during the late 1980s and early 1990s, you know Mike Tyson was the most frightening guy on the earth. He wasn't only winning fights, he was knocking out men in a split second. His punches were akin to a wrecking ball, and he sported this bone-chilling glint in his eyes that gave his opponents butterflies even before the fight had begun. He was the youngest heavyweight champion ever at the age of 20 and ruled the boxing world. Tyson's life outside the ring, however, was as crazy as his fights. He was famous for his bullying attitude, run-ins with the law, and erratic behavior. Perhaps one of the most shocking moments in boxing history was when, in 1997, he bit off Evander Holyfield's ear during a fight, something that is still being discussed today. Now, fast forward to today, and you'll see a completely different Mike Tyson. Gone is the terrifying fighter who once ruled the ring. Instead, Tyson has become a mellow, thoughtful, and even funny person. He now hosts a popular podcast called Hot Boxin' with Mike Tyson, where he talks about life, boxing, and deep personal experiences. He also runs a successful cannabis business, something that would have been unthinkable during his fighting days. 4. Muhammad Ali. Of all the boxing legends, Muhammad Ali is the first person to pop into mind. Not only was he a boxer, but he was also a cultural icon, a civil rights activist, and a man who redefined the sport altogether. Famous for his speedy footwork, quick tongue, and unbelievable confidence, Ali was notorious for spouting lines such as "float like a butterfly, sting like a bee." Ali's biggest fights, like the Rumble in the Jungle against George Foreman and the Thrilla in Manila against Joe Frazier, are still considered some of the greatest moments in sports history. His ability to dodge punches, his powerful jabs, and his unbreakable spirit made him one of the most admired athletes in the world. But in his later years, Ali's physical appearance changed drastically due to Parkinson's disease. The once quick-talking, fast-moving champion became slower, his voice softer, and his movements less controlled. The disease took a toll on his body, but it never broke his spirit. Even though he looked completely different, his presence was still powerful. Ali kept inspiring others even after he retired from boxing. He made appearances at high-profile events, met world leaders, and was always revered as the greatest. His metamorphosis served as a reminder that even the greatest warriors are human beings, and time ages everyone. 5. Larry Holmes. Larry Holmes was perhaps the most underappreciated heavyweight champion in boxing history. He dominated the division during the late 1970s and early 1980s, defending his title a record 20 times. He possessed a world-class left jab, one of the greatest ever in the sport, and could take a punch like few others, making him a nightmare for his opponents. Holmes went up against some of the sport's biggest stars, including Muhammad Ali, Ken Norton, and Mike Tyson. He was the individual who gave Muhammad Ali one of his worst losses. Although he later conceded that it was hard for him to fight his hero emotionally. Holmes boxed deep into his 40s, showing that he was one of the most durable fighters of his time. But if you were to look at Larry Holmes today, you would not believe that he was once one of the greatest dominant heavyweights. Now in his 70s, he appears more like a businessman than a boxer. He switched his boxing gloves for a real estate and entrepreneurship career. He owns restaurants and office buildings, among other businesses, and has concentrated on building a secure life away from boxing. Rather than entering the ring, Holmes now spends his days providing interviews, running his businesses, and living in retirement. Though he might not appear to be the ferocious warrior he once was, his success in and out of the ring proves that he is still a champion in every way. 6. Joe Frazier. Joe Frazier, or Smokin' Joe, was the most aggressive brawler of his era. A relentless pressure brawler who would never back off, always press forward and bomb away with the heaviest shots. His biggest fights were with Muhammad Ali, particularly their notorious trilogy, the classic Thrilla in Manila in 1975. Frazier was the first man to beat Ali, beating him in their first bout in 1971 with a devastating left hook that knocked Ali onto the canvas. His aggressive fighting style and unbelievable endurance made him a crowd favorite. Yet Joe Frazier's later life was hard, both in terms of money and body. Unlike a few of his competitors, he did not make millions following retirement. He struggled financially and led a far less luxurious lifestyle than individuals anticipated. By the time he died of liver cancer in 2011, he was nearly unrecognizable from the fighter that once was. Though once a muscular and intimidating fighter, Frazier grew thinner and weaker, evidencing the toll of time and disease. But despite his physical changes, his reputation as one of the all-time great heavyweights was unscathed. 7. Sugar Ray Leonard. If you were watching boxing during the 1980s, Sugar Ray Leonard was one of the biggest stars of the sport. He was a flashy, fast, and charismatic fighter who could outbox and outsmart just about anyone. Leonard was well known for his lightning-fast hands, footwork, and his dazzling smile. He captured world championships in 5 weight divisions, a feat that few boxers have equaled. Among his most iconic battles were against Roberto Duran, Thomas Hearns, and Marvin Hagler, all of them classics in the history of boxing. Leonard was a master at making fights interesting, and people adored his fighting style. But if you look at Sugar Ray Leonard today, he is totally different from his younger counterpart. The youthful, energetic boxer of yesteryears now sports gray hair and a more mature, sophisticated appearance. Rather than boxing in the ring, Leonard has spent the last few decades as a motivational speaker, sports commentator, and philanthropist. He applies his life experiences, his professional boxing career, addiction, and what he learned from life to motivate others. He addresses corporate conventions, schools, and charities, and passes on the lesson of perseverance and success. Though Leonard no longer strides across the ring with the youthful fighter he once was, his quick wit and charm are still there. He remains active in the sport as an analyst and commentator, influencing the next generation of athletes. 8. Roberto Duran. Famous for his ferocity, iron jaw, and never-back-down style of fighting, Duran was among the most dreaded pugilists of the 1970s and 1980s. He carried a moniker that spoke volumes, Manos de Piedra, hands of stone, since his punches were just incredibly strong. Duran captured world titles in 4 different weights and boxed some of the biggest stars of boxing, including Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler, and Thomas Hearns. Perhaps his greatest achievement was when he beat Sugar Ray Leonard in 1980 and handed Leonard his first loss in the pro arena. However, in their return match, Duran stunned the world by resigning mid-match, uttering the infamous words, "No más, no more." A long time ago, Duran was lean, quick, and warrior-built. But when you look at him today, he is a whole different person. Throughout the years, he gained a lot of weight, and the lean fighter he used to be now has a much different build. But his personality hasn't changed. He is still just as charming and fun-loving as he used to be. Now Duran enjoys life as a boxing ambassador, speaker, and favorite icon in Panama. Though he might not possess the ferocious physique that he had before, he is still among the all-time greats, showing that his legend transcends appearance. 9. Oscar de la Hoya. Oscar de la Hoya was nicknamed the Golden Boy because he possessed everything: good looks, amazing boxing ability, and a charming personality that made him one of the most popular boxers in history. De la Hoya was a 6th Division world champion and a 1992 Olympic gold medalist before becoming a pro. He fought some of the biggest stars in the sport, such as Floyd Mayweather Jr., Manny Pacquiao, and Shane Mosley. His bouts always attracted huge audiences, and he was among the best-paid boxers of his time. In his prime, De La Hoya sported a young, youthful face, always looking sharp and athletic. But now when you catch sight of him, he is an entirely different person. After retiring in 2008, De La Hoya went on to become a boxing promoter, launching Golden Boy Promotions, one of the largest companies in the sport. Rather than training for bouts, he now spends his days arranging them. Years have passed and his look has altered. He's older, his face is fuller, and he walks differently. He has also been candid about his addiction and mental health issues, which have contributed to his transformation. Although he doesn't resemble the Golden Boy of yesteryear, his impact on boxing is still prevalent. He's now the behind-the-scenes man, assisting in the development of the next crop of champions. 10. Julio Cesar Chavez. When individuals speak of the greatest Mexican boxers of all time, Julio Cesar Chavez tends to be first on the list. He was a 6-time world champion across 3 weight classes and possessed one of the most extended unbeaten runs in boxing history. Chavez was infamous for his constant pressure, granite chin, and his capacity to absorb punishment while dishing out vicious body shots. His fighting style was so admired by the fans that he became a national icon in Mexico. He remained unbeaten in an incredible 90 fights before finally getting beat, a record that can never be broken. In his own boxing days, Chavez was a hardened, rough-bitten man. He had the war-scarred face of 10,000 battles within the ring and an always pinched, knitted look about him. Now, however, if you notice him, you'll find him a very changed man. Today, a respected boxing analyst and commentator, Chavez has gracefully aged. The rough appearance that was once a part of his being has been replaced with something more refined, polished. He dons sophisticated suits, addresses the microphone confidently, and is now a father figure to aspiring Mexican boxers. Nonetheless, his life outside of the ring has not been straightforward. Chavez has talked candidly about his addiction problems and personal demons post-retirement. He battled them, and today lives to give back to others, including his sons, who followed in his professional boxing footsteps. 11. Lennox Lewis. Lennox Lewis was one of the greatest and wisest heavyweight title holders in boxing history. With a height of 6'5", Lawal, and an 84-inch reach, he employed his size, strength, and deft boxing skills to dominate the heavyweight division of the 1990s and early 2000s. He won numerous world titles and beat some of the biggest names in the ring, including Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, and Vitali Klitschko. Lewis was known for his short hair and clean-cut look in his fighting days. He was no nonsense in the ring and always had the air of a champion about him. But if you look at Lennox Lewis these days, he's totally different. Rather than the trim fighter fans have come to recall, Lewis has let his hair grow out and now sports a laid-back, almost bohemian appearance. He has immersed himself in retirement, loving every minute of it as a boxing commentator, analyst, and worldwide ambassador for the sport. He still pays attention to boxing, frequently offering his expert commentary on upcoming bouts, but he now does so with a much more relaxed energy than during his highly competitive fighting career. Though he does not appear to be the heavyweight destroyer that he once was, his wisdom and knowledge keep him on the short list of most admired figures in the sport of boxing. 12. Riddick Bowe. During the early 1990s, Riddick Bowe was among the most feared heavyweights on the planet. He was quick, strong, and very skilled for a large man, becoming the heavyweight champion by beating Evander Holyfield in 1992. The bout became one of the greatest fights in the history of boxing. Bowe's potential seemed limitless, but his career took unexpected turns. He refused to fight Lennox Lewis, a decision that damaged his legacy, and later his personal life became filled with legal troubles and health problems. If you remember the young, muscular Riddick Bowe of the 1990s, you might not recognize him today. He has gained weight dramatically over the years, and his health ailments have brought extreme changes to his looks. There have been instances when he used to struggle in speaking clearly, and his speed of movement was slower than earlier. 13. Thomas Hearns. In the 1980s, Thomas the Hitman Hearns was boxing's most exciting fighter. He was tall, slender, and possessed devastating punching power, making him a bane for his rivals. His lengthy arms and derailing right hand made him the most feared fighter of that era. Hearns captured world championships in 5 weight divisions, a remarkable feat. His classic battles with Sugar Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, and Marvin Hagler are still being discussed today, particularly his savage battle with Hagler, which was only 3 rounds long, but is ranked as one of the greatest fights in boxing history. At his prime, Hearns was a lean, muscular man with a sharp young face. Today, however, time has not been kind to him. He has visibly aged, his body much thinner, and his face bears the experience of the wars he waged in the ring. His once unstoppable fists now quiver slightly, evidence of the price that boxing takes from a warrior's body. Despite these developments, Hearns continues to be a part of the sport, frequenting boxing events, talking about his previous fights, and promoting up-and-coming fighters. 14. Marvin Hagler. Marvelous Marvin Hagler was among the greatest middleweight champions of all time. He dominated the division during the 1980s, defending his title for almost 7 years and beating some of the best fighters of his generation. His bout against Thomas Hearns in 1985 remains one of the most grueling and action-packed fights ever. Hagler was famous for his piercing stare, shaved head, and no-nonsense demeanor in the ring. He was a warrior who never retreated from a fight. But after retiring in 1987, Hagler did something unusual for a boxer. He walked away from the sport entirely. Rather than remaining in the boxing limelight, he relocated to Italy and became an actor, leading a private and serene life. By the time he made sporadic public appearances, Hagler was a different man altogether. He sported a bald head, had a more laid-back attitude, and appeared content with life post-boxing. He lacked the fire in his eyes that fans recalled during his fighting days, but he walked with dignity and wisdom. Sadly, Hagler passed away in 2021, leaving behind a legendary career. 15. Floyd Mayweather Sr. Floyd Mayweather Sr. might not be as well known as his son, Floyd Mayweather Jr., but don't get it twisted. He was a skilled fighter in his own right. He fought professionally as a boxer during the 1970s and 1980s, recognized for his defense, fast hands, and punching avoidance skills. Unfortunately, his own boxing career was shortened by injuries, and he went on to become one of the sport's most respected trainers. When Mayweather Sr. was fighting, he was lean and athletic-looking and had a focused, sharp expression. He was always confidently carrying himself, much like his son does currently. But if you look at him today, you might not immediately know who he is. Now, Mayweather Sr. has gray hair, a lean build, and an older, wiser demeanor. He no longer resembles the fighter who entered the ring years ago. Instead, he has fully accepted his place as a veteran of the sport, training and guiding young boxers. He still possesses the same attitude and quick wit, but his appearance has changed over the years. In spite of all the changes, Mayweather Sr. is still an important part of boxing. He is still renowned for his individualistic training, poetic insults, and being able to instruct on defense, more so than nearly everybody else. 16. Bernard Hopkins. Bernard Hopkins is one of the most unbelievable tales in the annals of boxing history. Not only was he an excellent fighter, he was a fighter who defied aging. Most fighters declined by their mid-30s, but Hopkins continued to fight at a top level through his late 40s. Hopkins began his career after doing time in prison, and he became one of the sport's most hardworking and disciplined fighters shortly after. His work ethic, defensive style, high boxing IQ, and ability to adapt allowed him to become a world champion at middleweight and light heavyweight. He set records by becoming the oldest world champion in the history of boxing at 49 years old. In his prime, Hopkins had a shaved head, lean muscle mass, and serious, intense expression that rendered him intimidating. He always had the appearance of a man poised for battle. But now? Hopkins has not aged badly at all, but he looks very different from the days when he used to fight. Today, he behaves more like a businessman than a boxer. His face tells of the years of combat that he engaged in, and his disposition is far less fiery than before. He continues to remain in good physical shape, but no longer possesses the extreme warrior-type intensity that he once did inside the ring. Rather, he has evolved into a mentor and analyst, sharing knowledge with young boxers and remaining a presence in the sport in the background. 17. Vladimir Klitschko. During the 2000s, Vladimir Klitschko was arguably the greatest heavyweight champion of all time. At 6 inches with a phenomenal jab and devastating knockout punch, he dominated the heavyweight division for more than a decade, successfully defending his titles against the world's best challengers. With his brother Vitali Klitschko, he put European boxing on the global map. Klitschko was famous for his athletic physique, stern expression, and mechanical fighting style. He wasn't the most flashy fighter, but he was incredibly efficient. His record-breaking reign as champion turned him into a household name, particularly in Europe. But if you spot Vladimir Klitschko today, you could be forgiven for thinking that he's a businessman rather than a retired boxing champion. After retiring, Klitschko turned his attention to education, business, and even politics. He has neatly styled, short hair, tailored suits, and speaks like a professor, not a fighter. He spends more time lecturing at universities and writing about leadership than he does discussing boxing. It's a radical transformation from the fighter fans remember. Even though he looks totally different, Klitschko still acts like a champion. he is still very much a part of the boxing community and continues to inspire young athletes with his commitment to discipline, intelligence, and hard work. 18. Vitali Klitschko. Vitali Klitschko was a commanding figure in the heavyweight division. At 6'7", so he possessed remarkable knockout ability, and he was a nightmare to face. He captured several world titles and was famous for his chin of steel, devastating punches, and intelligent boxing technique. His bouts with Lennox Lewis, Chris Bird, and Samuel Peter solidified his standing as one of the greatest heavyweights of his generation. Inside the ring, Klitschko sported a robust, muscular build and a stern, intense face. He was business only, never showy, always sheer power and technique. But look at him now, and he is an entirely different person. After retiring from the sport of boxing, Klitschko transitioned into politics. Now he is the mayor of Kyiv, Ukraine, and an important figure in his nation's government. He no longer puts on boxing gloves, but instead dons business attire and addresses government sessions. His face, once stern and combat-ready, now wears the tranquil and somber expression of a politician. Although he still maintains his physical fitness, he no longer sports the ripped, intimidating body that he used to as a boxer. Despite the fact that he appears different, Klitschko's warrior spirit remains intact. Rather than fighting his adversaries in the ring, he now fights for his nation on the political front, leaving a colossal mark beyond the world of sports. 19. James Toney. James Lights Out. Toney was among the smoothest, most talented boxers of his era. He possessed a remarkable ability to slip punches, counterpunch, and make his opponents miss. During the 1990s and early 2000s, he captured world titles in several weight classes, ranging from middleweight all the way up to heavyweight. In his prime, Toney was lean and muscular, with a sharp, self-assured expression. He had the air of a man who knew he was superior to his foes, and he usually was. But if you look at James Toney these days, he is nearly unrecognizable. He has added a lot of weight over the years, and his sleek figure is now far heavier. The keen, intent expression in his eyes has been softened, and he no longer possesses the speed he once did. His physique has experienced the natural consequences of aging, and his speech is slower because of the beating he took in the ring. Even with the changes, Toney is still active in boxing. He trains up-and-coming fighters and makes sporadic appearances at boxing events. Although his physical shape is staggering, his understanding of the sport is as keen as ever. Although he does not walk like he did in the past, his mind is full of the boxing insight that earned him a championship. 20. Roy Jones Jr. Roy Jones Jr. was one of the greatest boxers in history. His knockout punch, hand speed, and reflexes were a combination that made him an unbeatable champion in several different weight classes, from middleweight to heavyweight. Jones had an unusual style. He would lower his hands, circle around his opponent, and then be able to land punches before they even realized they were coming. At his best, Jones had a sculpted, athletic physique and a cocky, self-assured demeanor. His fights were appointment viewing, and he was able to make world-class opponents appear like amateurs. But now when you look at Roy Jones Jr., he is much different. Although he remains a part of the boxing world as a trainer and commentator, time has altered his formerly youthful looks. His face is fuller, his hair is grayer, and the lightning-fast reflexes, which once made him known worldwide, are now much slower. Jones continues to train and even fought in exhibition bouts in recent years, such as a bout with Mike Tyson in 2020. But the Jones we now see is nothing compared to the untouchable fighter he was once. Despite the fact that he appears different, his love for boxing has never wavered. He is still a giant in the sport, sharing his expertise with the new generation of boxers. His days as a ring monarch are gone,